Elena sat quietly in the back seat of her car, looking out of the window. The airport was only a few minutes away. She wore a plain blue sweater, black jeans, and simple white sneakers. Nothing about her clothes said rich or important. But what no one knew was, she owned the entire airline. Elena was a billionaire, but she never liked showing off. She had worked hard for everything she had. Years ago, she started with nothing. Now, she was the CEO of one of the fastest-growing airlines in the country. But today, she wasn't flying as the owner. She was flying as a regular passenger to see how her staff truly treated people. Her driver opened the door. "Have a safe flight, ma'am," he said politely. Elena smiled, grabbed her small carry-on bag, and walked into the airport. She moved like any other traveler. Quiet, calm, no bodyguards, no assistants, just a woman heading to a business meeting. A very important one, but no one needed to know that. At the check-in counter, she gave her name. The agent handed her the ticket, not even looking up. "Gate 12, first class," he said in a bored voice. Elena nodded and walked toward security. Everything was normal, just how she wanted it. Inside the gate area, she sat alone, reading a book. She noticed people walking by, some in suits, some in uniforms, some with loud voices, others just tired from travel. Then boarding was called. First-class passengers were allowed to board early. Elena stood up with her ticket and walked toward the gate. On board, the plane was quiet. A few passengers were already seated. The flight attendant stood near the front, greeting people. One of them, Sasha, a tall woman with sharp eyes and a stiff smile, looked at Elena and gave her a quick glance. From her shoes to her face, she didn't smile. Elena gave a soft hello and handed over her ticket. Sasha looked at it, frowned, and then looked back at Elena. "This is a first-class seat," she said, her tone dry. "Yes," Elena answered calmly. Sasha didn't say welcome. She didn't even guide her to the seat. Instead, she just moved aside, still looking confused. Elena walked to her seat, 2A, and sat down by the window. She placed her small bag in the overhead bin and quietly buckled her seatbelt. She noticed Sasha whisper something to another flight attendant, who turned to look at her. They both rolled their eyes. Elena took a deep breath. She was used to this. People always judged her by how she looked. But today, she was not here to argue. She was here to observe. Soon, more passengers entered. A man in a suit walked in, and Sasha greeted him with a big smile, and even helped him with his bag. "Welcome, sir," she said sweetly. Elena watched this quietly. The difference was clear. A few minutes later, Sasha came down the aisle with a tray of drinks. She offered one to the man in the next seat. Then, without looking, she shoved a plastic cup of water on Elena's tray and walked away without a word. Elena didn't react. She just took a sip and continued reading her book. But inside, she was making notes. Suddenly, the plane shook slightly as the doors closed. It was almost time for takeoff. Sasha walked by again, checking seatbelts. She stopped at Elena's seat and gave her a cold look. "You sure you're in the right seat?" she asked with a smirk. Elena raised an eyebrow. "Yes, 2A, first class." Sasha narrowed her eyes. "You don't look like someone who flies first class often." Before Elena could reply, Sasha rolled her eyes and walked away. The businessman beside Elena leaned closer and whispered, "Ignore her. She's always like this." Elena gave a small smile. "Thanks. I'm used to it." The plane began to move toward the runway. The engines roared softly, and the cabin lights dimmed. Elena looked out the window, then down at her phone. She opened a message and typed something quickly. "She's here, watching everything. Let's see how far this goes." She hit send. The phone buzzed a moment later. A reply. "Got it. Call me when you land." Elena turned off her phone and leaned back in her seat. The flight was about to take off, and the real journey was just beginning. As the plane lifted off the runway, Elena sat still, watching the clouds through the window. The engine's hum filled the cabin. Around her, other first-class passengers settled in, sipping drinks or adjusting their seats. But one thing stood out. Sasha's attitude hadn't changed. Elena, despite her calm appearance, was observing everything. She noticed how Sasha treated others, kind, respectful, even playful. But when it came to Elena, Sasha's tone was cold, sharp, and filled with quiet judgment. A few minutes into the flight, Sasha returned to the first-class section with a menu. She smiled brightly as she offered it to a businessman. "We have a special beef fillet today, sir. Would you like that with red wine?" The man nodded, and she laughed politely at something he said. Then Sasha reached Elena's seat. Her smile disappeared. "We have chicken or pasta," she said flatly, not mentioning the special dish. She didn't offer a menu. Elena looked up calmly. "I heard there's a beef option too." Sasha raised an eyebrow. "That's only for elite flyers. You have chicken or pasta." Before Elena could respond, Sasha walked away, as if she didn't hear anything. The businessman next to Elena looked surprised. "She just offered me the beef." Elena smiled gently. "Yes, I noticed." The man leaned closer. "Are you going to complain?" Elena shook her head. "Not yet. I'm just watching." Sasha returned with the food. She placed the pasta in front of Elena without a word. No smile, no eye contact. But to everyone else, she was friendly and kind. Elena quietly ate, not making a scene. She had faced worse in life, and this was nothing new. Still, it hurt. Not for herself, but for others who didn't have the power she did. What if someone else was sitting here, being treated like they didn't belong? After lunch, the cabin lights dimmed. Some passengers watched movies or took naps. Elena took out her notebook and began writing. Notes, thoughts, everything she had seen so far. Suddenly, Sasha returned. She looked at Elena's notebook and frowned. "What are you writing?" she asked sharply. Elena looked up, calm as ever. "Just thoughts." Sasha crossed her arms. "You're not allowed to take notes about the crew. That's against airline rules." Elena blinked. "Is it?" "Yes," Sasha said quickly. "Passengers can't write about us without permission." Elena closed her notebook slowly. "Interesting. I didn't know that." "Now you do," Sasha said coldly and walked off again. The other flight attendant, Maria, had been watching from the galley. She looked uncomfortable. A few minutes later, she came quietly to Elena's seat. "I'm so sorry," Maria whispered. "She's just difficult sometimes. If you need anything, let me know." Elena nodded. "Thank you, Maria. You've been kind." Maria smiled nervously and hurried away. An hour later, turbulence hit. The plane shook, and the captain's voice came over the speaker. "Please fasten your seatbelts. Cabin crew, take your seats." Passengers held their drinks tightly. Elena stayed calm, eyes still watching everything. But just as things settled down, Sasha returned, this time with anger in her eyes. She stood beside Elena's seat, her voice low and bitter. "Listen, lady, I don't know who you think you are, but first class doesn't mean you can spy on people." Elena looked up, her voice still gentle. "I didn't say I was spying. I'm just observing." "You're making everyone uncomfortable," Sasha hissed. "Maybe you should move to the back." At this, several nearby passengers turned their heads. The businessman beside Elena sat up. "What are you talking about? She hasn't done anything." Sasha ignored him. "If you don't stop, I'll call the pilot." Elena gave a soft smile. "Please do." Sasha's face went red. "Fine." She spun around and marched down the aisle. The passengers around Elena were stunned. Whispers spread. "Why is she being so rude? What did that lady even do? Something's not right." Back in the galley, Sasha picked up the phone and called the cockpit. "Captain, we have a problem in first class. There's a woman causing trouble, writing things, acting strange. I think she might be a threat." The captain paused. Who's the passenger? She says her name is Elena. Something. The captain's voice changed. Elena. Yes, Sasha said, annoyed. There was a long silence on the line. Then the captain said something that made Sasha freeze. Put the phone down and come to the cockpit. Now. Sasha walked toward the cockpit slowly, her steps uncertain. Her face was pale now, not angry like before. The captain had never spoken to her like that. Something about the tone. It was serious. Too serious. She opened the cockpit door carefully. Captain Harris, a tall man with calm eyes and silver hair, was waiting. He looked up from the controls, his face firm. Sasha, he said in a low voice, do you know who that woman in seat 2A is? Sasha crossed her arms. No, but she's been acting strange. Writing things down. Questioning me. Making a scene. Captain Harris stared at her. She hasn't done anything wrong. And she's not just any passenger. Sasha raised her eyebrow. Then who is she? The captain leaned forward. Her name is Elena Johnson. She's the CEO and founder of this entire airline. Sasha blinked. What? You heard me right, Captain Harris said. She's the reason this airline exists. Every plane, every crew member, every paycheck, including yours, comes from her. She's flying with us today to see how we treat passengers. Sasha's mouth opened, but no words came out. You were rude to her, the captain said, his voice sharper now. You refused her the same food others received. You questioned her seat, even though she had a first-class ticket. And now you try to report her for writing in a notebook. I didn't know, Sasha whispered. That's the problem, the captain said. You didn't care to know. You saw a woman you thought didn't belong, and you acted on that. Sasha looked down at the floor, her face red with shame. I want you to apologize to her, the captain said firmly. Now. But what if she fires me? Sasha asked, her voice shaking. The captain looked her in the eye. That's not my decision. But the least you can do is face her. Own your mistake. Sasha nodded slowly and walked out of the cockpit. Meanwhile, Elena was still sitting quietly in her seat. The other passengers were buzzing with whispers. Some had already guessed that she was someone important. The businessman beside her leaned closer. Are you really the owner? Elena smiled gently. Yes, but today I came as a passenger, just like anyone else. He nodded in respect. Well, you've got the patience of a saint. Just then, Sasha appeared. Her face looked very different now. No arrogance, no fake smile, just nervousness and guilt. She stood beside Elena's seat and cleared her throat. Miss Johnson, I want to apologize. I didn't treat you with respect. I made assumptions. I was wrong. Elena looked up at her, her face calm. Why did you treat me that way? She asked softly. Sasha swallowed hard. I thought you didn't belong in first class. I judged you by how you looked. Elena nodded slowly. And how many other people have you treated the same way? Sasha didn't answer. Elena stood up, facing her directly. The whole cabin was quiet now, watching. I started this airline to create a better experience for everyone, Elena said clearly. Not just for the rich or the powerful, but for anyone who deserves respect. She paused, letting her words sink in. I came here today not just to observe, but to remind every crew member that kindness isn't optional. It's the heart of everything we do. Sasha's eyes filled with tears. I'm truly sorry, ma'am. I will change, I promise. Elena looked at her for a long moment. I hope you do. Then she sat down again. Captain Harris walked into the cabin. He nodded at Elena respectfully. Miss Johnson, is everything all right now? Elena smiled. It will be. The other passengers began to clap, soft at first, then louder. Not just for Elena's strength, but for her grace. She didn't yell. She didn't demand. She taught. Sasha walked back to the galley, shaken but thoughtful. She knew this flight had changed her forever. And Alina, she opened her notebook again. But this time, she wrote something different. Sometimes, the biggest power is in staying silent until it's time to speak. The cabin slowly returned to normal, but the atmosphere had changed. It was no longer just a flight. It was a moment people would remember for a long time. Passengers whispered among themselves. "Did you see that?" One man said to his wife. "She's the owner." A young woman asked her friend, eyes wide with surprise. "I thought she was just a regular lady," someone muttered. But Alina remained calm. She didn't speak loudly or draw attention. She just returned to her seat and opened her book, flipping through the pages like nothing had happened. But people were watching now, with respect. Meanwhile, in the galley, Sasha leaned against the wall, still shaken. Her hands trembled as she poured water into a glass. The other flight attendants looked at her quietly. No one said anything, but the tension in the air was heavy. Carla, another crew member, finally spoke. "You okay?" Sasha nodded weakly. "I messed up." Carla sighed. "Yeah, big time." Sasha wiped her eyes. She didn't yell. She didn't embarrass me. That somehow made it worse. Carla handed her a napkin. She didn't need to. Everyone saw it. And everyone's talking. In the passenger cabin, a little girl tugged her mother's sleeve. "Mommy, is that lady a queen?" Her mother smiled. "Something like that, sweetheart. She's the boss of the airplane." The girl looked impressed. "But she's so quiet." "That's what makes her strong," her mom replied. At the same time, one of the business class passengers, a man in a fancy suit, stood up and walked to Alina. He cleared his throat politely. "Miss Johnson," he said, offering his hand. "I had no idea who you were. I just wanted to say, I respect the way you handled everything." Alina stood and shook his hand. "Thank you. But I didn't do it to impress anyone. I just wanted to see how people were treated when no one's watching." He nodded. "Well, I think the whole world could learn from you." Suddenly, the intercom buzzed. It was Captain Harris. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge someone very important on this flight. Miss Alina Johnson, the owner of this airline. She is flying with us today, not as a VIP, but as a regular passenger. Her presence reminds us all that dignity, kindness, and respect must be given to every traveler, no matter who they are." The entire cabin erupted in applause. Even those who had no idea what had happened earlier could feel that something important had just taken place. In the galley, Sasha heard the clapping. Her eyes filled with tears again. Carla gave her a soft nudge. "Go ahead," she said. "Say something real to her this time." Sasha walked back to the cabin slowly. She approached Alina again, this time with her heart in her hands. "Miss Johnson," she said softly, "I've worked for this airline for 6 years. I thought I knew what the job meant, but I realize now, I didn't. Not really." Alina looked up, her eyes kind but firm. "I judged you. I let my own thoughts cloud my duty. And I'm sorry. Truly." Alina nodded slowly. "Sasha, this moment can define you, or destroy you. It depends on what you do next." Sasha wiped her eyes. "I want to learn. I want to change. Not just because you're the boss, but because you reminded me who I should be." Alina smiled gently. "Then start now. Treat every person with respect, not because of who they are, but because it's the right thing to do." Sasha nodded. "I will." Alina reached out her hand. Sasha shook it. The passengers watching all smiled, quietly moved by the simple but powerful moment. As Sasha turned to walk away, Alina sat down again and looked out the window. Her thoughts were full. She had taken a risk, boarding the plane as just another face in the crowd. And now she had seen what needed to change. But even more important, she had also seen hope. As the plane moved forward through the clouds, something else was rising too: respect for Alina. It wasn't just that she owned the airline. It was how she carried herself. Quiet, calm, strong. Passengers whispered her name. Crew members looked at her differently now. But no one felt uncomfortable, only inspired. Back in the galley, Sasha sat alone during the crew's break. She stared at her hands. They had once served coffee, handled tickets, greeted people. But now, they felt heavy with regret. She remembered how she had slapped Elena. Not hard, but still. How could she? How could she not see past the simple dress and quiet voice? She had been trained to treat all passengers with respect. But somewhere along the way, she had forgotten that. Carla returned from the cabin and sat beside her. "She's not going to fire you," Carla said gently. Sasha looked at her. "I wouldn't blame her if she did." Carla gave a small smile. "You saw what she did. She forgave you in front of everyone. She didn't yell. She gave you a chance. Don't waste it." Sasha took a deep breath. "I won't." Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Captain Harris was speaking to the co-pilot. "She didn't tell us she was flying today," he said, impressed. "I know," the co-pilot replied. "She wanted to be treated like everyone else." Captain Harris nodded slowly. "That's how you know a real leader." Back in first class, Elena pulled out her laptop. She wasn't working. She was writing notes. She had seen a lot during this flight. Not just Sasha's mistake, but how the other staff reacted. Some stayed silent. Some looked the other way. A few tried to help. She would remember all of it. Suddenly, a voice came from behind. "Excuse me, Miss Johnson." It was the businessman from earlier again. "Yes?" she asked, polite as ever. "My name is Charles Dean. I work in finance, and I'm a regular flyer on your airline. If you don't mind me saying, I think you've made a bigger impact today than any billboard or ad campaign." Elena smiled. Kindness spreads faster than money. Mr. Dean chuckled. "That's true. And for what it's worth, I'll be telling everyone about this flight." She thanked him kindly, and he returned to his seat. Just then, a flight attendant approached Elena. Not Sasha this time. It was Marcus, one of the younger crew members. He looked nervous, but determined. "Miss Johnson," he said, "I want to thank you for being brave and for showing us how much our job means." Elena looked at him thoughtfully. "Do you love this job, Marcus?" "I do," he said with a smile. "But today reminded me why I started." "Then keep that feeling alive," Elena said gently. "The way you treat people, it builds this airline's future more than any plane or profit ever will." Marcus nodded. "I understand." The words stuck with him. A few rows back, an elderly woman who had watched everything unfold leaned over to her husband. "You know," she whispered, "I've taken this airline for years. But today felt different." Her husband nodded. "That woman, Elena, she reminded me of something." "What's that?" "That dignity is silent strength. You don't have to shout to be powerful." As the plane began to descend, the pilot made another announcement. "We'll be landing shortly. Thank you for choosing our airline. And a special thank you to Miss Elena Johnson for reminding us all what leadership looks like." A few people clapped. Then more. Then the entire cabin. Not because she asked for it, but because she earned it. Sasha stood at the front of the plane near the exit, waiting to say goodbye to passengers. Her heart was still nervous, but steadier now. Elena stood up, gathered her things, and walked down the aisle with grace. As she passed Sasha, she paused. "I'll be calling a meeting with the crew," she said softly. "Not to punish, to rebuild." Sasha nodded. "I'll be there." Elena offered a final smile. "I'm counting on it." Then she walked off the plane, the door closing behind her. But something new had opened. A door to change. A door to growth. And for Sasha, maybe, a second chance. The airport lights were bright as Elena stepped off the plane. Cameras flashed from a distance. Some passengers had already shared photos online, but she didn't stop to talk. She walked calmly, her heels clicking softly against the floor. Behind her, the flight crew was quiet. Everyone was thinking about what had just happened. Sasha was the last to leave the plane. Her hand shook slightly as she pulled her bag behind her. She looked around and didn't see Elena anymore. For a moment, she felt lost. Outside, rain had started to fall. Light drops hit the windows like soft warnings. Sasha stood by the crew exit, unsure what to do next. Then a message buzzed on her phone. Meeting with executive team, 9 a.m. tomorrow. Attendance required. EJ. Her heart dropped. She knew this was about what had happened on the flight. But what would Elena say? Would it be her final day? That night, Elena sat in her quiet home, drinking tea. She looked out the window at the rain and thought about the flight. She didn't enjoy power. She didn't like punishing people. But something had to change. She opened her laptop and typed out names. Crew members who had helped. Passengers who had spoken up. And yes, Sasha. She paused when she typed Sasha's name. Elena remembered the look in her eyes after the slap. It wasn't hate. It was fear and confusion. Maybe even shame. People could change, but they had to want it. Elena wrote one word beside Sasha's name. Watch. The next morning, the meeting room inside the airline's headquarters was filled with tension. Crew leaders, pilots, and staff whispered quietly. Everyone had heard what happened. Sasha sat in the back, her shoulders tight, hands folded. Then the door opened. Elena walked in, not as the quiet passenger now, but as the CEO. She wore a sharp black suit. Her voice was calm, but firm. "Good morning," she said. Everyone sat straight. "I didn't call this meeting to shame anyone," she continued. "I called it because we need to talk about something serious." She paused, looking around. Respect. She let the words sit in the air for a moment. This airline wasn't built just with planes or money. It was built with how we treat people. Every single person. Elena's voice softened just a bit. "Yesterday, I saw how easy it is to forget that." Whispers spread around the room. "I was judged by my clothes, my skin, and my seat," she said. "And I wasn't the first. And I won't be the last, unless we change." Now the room was silent. Elena turned slightly, looking straight at Sasha. There was a moment. A mistake. A serious one. But the person who made it didn't run. She stayed. She faced the truth. And that takes courage. Sasha's eyes filled with tears. Elena continued, "I believe people can grow. And I believe in second chances." Then she surprised everyone. She smiled, which is why Sasha will be leading our new staff respect training program, with guidance. Gasps filled the room. Sasha looked up, shocked. "Me?" "Yes," Elena said, "because the best teachers are the ones who have learned the hard way." After the meeting, Elena stepped outside. The sun was finally out after the rain. Sasha caught up with her near the hallway. "I don't know what to say," Sasha said softly. "Then just say this," Elena replied, "that you won't forget." "I won't," Sasha promised. "Not ever." Elena nodded. "Good, because real change starts when the storm passes, and we choose to rebuild." Sasha looked at her one last time. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Elena's voice was warm. "Thank you for not giving up on yourself." And with that, they both walked forward, toward a new chapter. Weeks had passed since the shocking incident on the plane. The day the world learned that the quiet black woman in first class was actually the owner of the entire airline. The story had gone viral. News stations picked it up. Blogs wrote about it. Social media exploded. But for Elena, it was never about fame. It was about making sure it never happened again. In the weeks that followed, Elena worked behind the scenes, not as a CEO, but as a mentor, a listener, a builder. Sasha had changed too. It was early morning when Sasha walked into the airline's training center, now decorated with a new sign on the wall. "People first. A new sky begins with us." She took a deep breath. Today was her first day leading the Respect training program. She had spent hours preparing, not just with books and slides, but with real reflection. She had spoken to former passengers, listened to stories, and even apologized to people she'd treated poorly before. She walked to the front of the room, where new flight attendants were seated. They looked young, nervous, excited, just like she had been years ago. Sasha spoke clearly. I used to think that being in charge on the plane meant being the loudest, the strictest. But I was wrong. Being a leader means being kind, even when no one is watching. The room grew quiet. I once judged someone for the way they looked. I thought she didn't belong, but she owned the whole airline, and she gave me a second chance. Sasha's voice cracked a little, but she smiled. I want to be someone who gives others a chance too. That's why I'm here. The new recruits applauded. Some even wiped their eyes. Meanwhile, Elena watched the live feed from her office. She didn't need to be in the spotlight. Watching others grow, that was her true reward. She smiled quietly. Suddenly, her assistant knocked. Ms. Elena, your next flight is ready. Elena grabbed her small suitcase and stood up. Where are we heading today? She asked. Community Summit in Atlanta. You're the keynote speaker. Perfect, she nodded. Let's keep flying forward. At the airport, Elena walked through the terminal just like she always did. No security team, no loud announcements. Just her, dressed simply. People didn't notice her, and she liked it that way. As she boarded her plane, a young flight attendant greeted her with a warm smile. Good morning, ma'am. Can I help you with your seat? Elena smiled back. No, thank you. I've got it. But then, the attendant looked closer. Wait, are you? Elena gave a small nod. The young woman's eyes widened. I read your story. You're the reason I became a flight attendant. Elena was touched. That means a lot. Just remember, be kind always. I will, the attendant promised. Elena walked to her seat in first class, not because it was expensive, but because she had earned it, with years of hard work, quiet strength, and grace. Across the world, people were still talking about the woman who owned an airline and was slapped on her own plane. But what they didn't always mention was what happened next. The changes she made, the people she helped, the respect she restored. Elena looked out the window as the plane lifted into the sky. Above the clouds, there were no ranks, no titles, no colors, just open space and endless possibilities. And that was the world she believed in. 2 months had passed since the day Elena was disrespected on her own airline. What started as a painful moment had become a movement. Elena didn't just want to fix one crew member's attitude. She wanted to fix the entire culture of the airline industry, to build a place where every passenger, no matter who they were, felt respected, safe, and seen. But change wasn't easy. In a bright, glass-walled conference room, Elena stood before her leadership team. Behind her, a large screen displayed the words, Project Elevate, lifting people, not just planes. She looked around at the group, directors, pilots, senior managers. Some were still uncomfortable with the changes she'd made. Some didn't believe a CEO should dress like a regular passenger or ride coach to test service. But they couldn't deny the truth. Elena had brought something back to the airline. Something powerful. Humanity. We don't fly machines, she said to the group, her voice calm and strong. We fly hearts. We carry people's dreams, their fears, their families, their lives, and how we treat them in the air shapes how they feel on the ground. There was silence, then slow, respectful applause. In the months that followed, Elena introduced new training programs, better reporting systems, and most importantly, anonymous passenger surveys that actually mattered. Every story was read. Every complaint was taken seriously. Sasha, the flight attendant who had once disrespected Elena, now led the Compassion Committee, a team that helped support staff going through stress or burnout. She had grown into a true leader. She never forgot the day she met Alina, and she used that lesson every single time she stepped onto a plane. One day, Alina visited a small-town airport. There wasn't a press team, no red carpet, just Alina in a simple blue coat watching flights land, and people hugged their families. She sat at a coffee counter in the terminal, sipping tea. Next to her sat a young girl holding a worn-out teddy bear. She looked nervous. First time flying. Alina asked gently. The girl nodded. I'm going to see my mom. She's sick. I'm scared I'll get lost. Alina smiled softly. You're not alone. There are kind people in the sky who'll help you. The girl looked up. Are you one of them? Alina paused, then nodded. Yes, I try to be. Later that week, Alina was invited to a national leadership summit. Other CEOs spoke about numbers, profits, expansions. But when it was her turn, Alina walked onto the stage quietly. No slideshow, no microphone tricks, just her voice. I once got slapped on my own plane, she began. The audience gasped. I could have fired someone. I could have walked away. But I chose to rebuild. Because power is not what you do when you win. It's what you do when you're hurt. She paused. Kindness is not weakness. It's the real fuel that keeps this world moving. The room rose in a standing ovation. Not because Alina was rich, but because she was right. Back at her office, Alina stood near the window, watching a plane take off. Her assistant walked in. Alina, the board just approved your new project, the School for Future Flight Crews. Alina smiled. Good, she whispered. Let's build a sky where everyone belongs. And with that, she walked out just as quietly as she had entered this journey. Because for Alina, the skies were never the limit.